What happens if a contract deadline falls on a holiday or a weekend? Well, I'm going to tell you about a 1979 Oklahoma Supreme Court case that tells us exactly what happens. And I want you to stick around to the very end because I'm going to give you my 5 tips and rules for how to deal with contract dates and deadlines that fall on a holiday or a weekend. When we schedule things on days that are weekends, holidays, we run into a potential problem. And we asked if we have a closing date that is scheduled for a holiday or maybe a Sunday, for example, what happens? So again, the scenario in this case would be we accidentally didn't pay attention to the calendar. And let's say we scheduled closing for Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday on January 20th is the day that we're looking at here. And it's like, oh, we didn't know, we didn't pay attention. And so now we've got closing scheduled for Monday. And again, when we looked at the contract itself, the contract said that closing shall be completed on or before this date, right? And then time is of the essence, right? Down in paragraph 16, we have said that time is of the essence, and time is of the essence means that there are hard deadlines, that a deadline is a hard deadline. And so what happens in this case when we did that? The buyer's argument would be, well, because the closing date was on a holiday or a weekend, I get to come to the next day that's not a holiday or weekend and close. I'm entitled to do that. And the seller's argument would be, no, you are not entitled to do that because time is of the essence. You should have closed on or before, so you should have been here on Friday. And most of us, our mind would say intuitively by just reading the contract, and truly like just reading the contract, it would say that, yeah, the seller's correct. Buyer, you should have closed on or before, you should have paid more attention. And that would generally be true, except for this little problem that we have of this statute in Oklahoma. This is in Title 25, and Title 25 is our general definition statutes for the state. This is not specific to real estate. This is just like a general statute in Oklahoma. And what it says is, first of all, the following dates are considered holidays in Oklahoma. And those holidays in Oklahoma are things like Saturday and Sunday are considered holidays. And then New Year's Day and Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday on the third Monday in January, et cetera, right? Thanksgiving and Christmas and the day before Christmas and the day after Thanksgiving. All these things are designated as holidays. And then when you drop down in this statute to paragraph C, it has this interesting language that says, any act authorized, required, or permitted to be performed on a holiday, as designated up above, may be performed on the next succeeding business day, and no liability or loss of rights of any kind shall occur from such delay. Now that's interesting language. This is language that you would not know this even exists, right? I suspect that most of you, unless you've been in one of my classes, you've never seen this before, right? That any act that is authorized, required, or permitted to be performed on a holiday, you can go to the next day that's a business day that's not a holiday, and no liability or loss of rights of any kind shall result from such delay. Have you ever been stuck in a difficult transaction and you need to phone a friend to get some help? Well, that's why we created RPro Access, to have a place, a community of professionals where you can get help with contracts, compliance, and the difficult situations that you're in. So when you're stuck, RPro Access helps you get unstuck. You can find out more at rproaccess.com. Check it out. Like, what does this have to do with real estate? What does it have to do with real estate contracts? And in general, you would say probably nothing, because like, it's just a general definition statute. Probably this has something to do with like the government or whatever, not something to do with real estate contracts. And you would be wrong, because what we have is this case that came up before the Oklahoma Supreme Court in 1979 called Foray versus Bedschek. I assume that's how you pronounce that, Foray versus Bedschek. And what happened in this case is exactly what we're talking about here. In the contract, we had a closing date scheduled for a Sunday. And they had the exact same closing shall occur on or before this date. And they had the exact same time is of the essence in the contract. And so we got into this argument in this case back in 1979, where the buyer says, I get to go to the next day that's not a holiday because of that statute we just looked at. And the seller said, no, 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 time is of the essence, you don't get to. And when the court looked at this case, here's what they said. They cited that statute. They said that statute is unambiguous in speaking of any act, any act. And so they said that the date of closing on October 1st was extended by statute to October 2nd, that Monday. This just happened by operation of law because of that statute. And then they went down and they said, we find the sellers breached the contract on October 2nd by telling the buyers, we're not going to close. And so it should have had that opportunity for the buyers because of this statute. And they said, look, the contract says on or before October 4th, but we have to read the statute into the contract because October 1st was a Sunday. So closing was really on or before the 2nd. That's kind of wild to me. Most of us don't know that this exists. And I think the issue for me is that it raises a question then as to all these other dates and deadlines that we have in the contract, right? So closing, sure, we can recognize that closing date in the contract, this is a holiday. And so, yeah, the buyers would actually get until the 21st to do it. But what about these other holidays where the deadline to negotiate our TRR is on the 1st? Does that actually mean it's on the 2nd? Or perhaps the deadline here, if our deadline to submit our TRR or cancel the contract is on December 25th, that is Christmas Day, that is a holiday, does that mean we actually have until the next day? That's not a holiday. Maybe. Maybe. Again, when we look at the statute, it says any act authorized, required, or permitted to be performed on a holiday, you get to go to the next day that's not, and no liability, loss of rights of any kind shall occur because of such delay. So that complicates things a little bit. Let me tell you how I have chosen to resolve this issue for us, because I don't ever want to have to rely on that. But here's the deal. Step one, I know that statute exists. So if we're ever in a bind, I at least have an argument to say, look, here's a case that addresses deadlines in a real estate contract, and they specifically address it. So maybe if we are in a bind, I have an argument. Second of all, though, my default position is that I don't care if our deadlines are on a holiday or a weekend or whatever that requires us to do something on our side of the transaction. We're going to get it done by that date. We're going to be on the ball. We're going to get it done. I'm not going to rely on needing extra time. And if I need extra time, my first step is going to be, let's go ask for an extension so we can negotiate that and say, look, this falls on a holiday. We didn't recognize that when we entered into the contract. So then our plan is going to be, let's try to negotiate an extension so that both parties are on the same page. And even before I get there, when we're ready to submit an offer or enter into a contract, we're going to map out when these deadlines are likely to fall. So we can even look at things like, are we going to be on vacation in the middle of the inspection period, or the buyer will be, or whatever. So try to have that foresight up front to do this exercise of recognizing when the dates and deadlines will be so you can avoid these problems up front. Just add some extra days to the inspection period or whatever to even avoid it. But then on the flip side is if the other party is needing grace because one of their deadlines falls on a holiday or weekend, and either they just submit it on the next day that's not a holiday or weekend, or they ask to, I would probably go to my client and say, look, it's probably not worth the fight, because there's a statute out there that says if there's any act authorized, required, or permitted to be performed on a holiday, they can go to the next day that's not a holiday, and they don't have any loss or liability of any kind. And so it's probably not worth the fight. So look, do we want to get this deal done or not? I mean, if they need an extra day because it falls on a holiday, that's not unreasonable. And so my philosophy is map it out up front, try to figure out when those deadlines are, give extra days if you need to, try to negotiate an extension if you absolutely need it. Just be on the ball and get things done and recognize we got a date problem, so let's just get it done by the date we said we would. Have in your back pocket this argument in case you absolutely need it.
give grace to others if that's the circumstance that they're in, because we see that they now have an argument, and I'm going to try not to use the argument myself unless I absolutely have to. So that's kind of my philosophy on it. I know that that complicates things a little bit, but hopefully that gives you an idea of how you might look to interpret that and think about dates and deadlines when they fall on holidays or weekends. Again, the contract doesn't address it, so try to stick to the contract dates, but know that there is that statute out there and that case that addresses it in some of those weird circumstances.